Well, I can confirm that the President of the United States does not spend his time tweeting conspiracy theories. He spends his time working on behalf of the American people.
That's the White House press secretary pushing back against the comment from Republican Senator John Cornyn, asking the question of whether President Joe Biden is actually in charge of the country. So here's what happened. In a series of tweets, Cornyn cited Biden's infrequent cable news interviews and tweets of his own as supposed evidence of this. With us now, our political director, David Chalian. And David, good morning. It's always good to have you. So Cornyn was quoting from a Politico piece, basically saying, why isn't Biden doing more interviews or tweeting more, I don't know, outrageous things like the former president did? And then he added his little bit at the end, though, right? He said it invites the question, is he really in charge? My question to you is, why? Why is he doing this?
Well, Republicans are on a search for some kind of negative frame on Joe Biden that they can construct and then put all their criticism through that, because so far nothing is really stuck. They didn't formulate a really good argument that the American people bought against the COVID relief plan, that $1.9 trillion package that passed and got stimulus checks into people's hands. And Joe Biden is personally well-liked by the American people. So they haven't found an in here. And what they've been doing, Poppy, for the last several months, I mean, this started 10 days into the administration when Joe Biden had his first meeting with Republican senators about that COVID relief plan, this notion that he's really being run by a staff and they're running him further to the left than Joe Biden wants to be. He's this Trojan horse for big liberal policies that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer and Ron Klain, the chief of staff, they're trying to drive through. Now, that's not reality at all either, but they are desperately seeking some sort of approach here that can try and chisel away at Biden's popularity.
What evidence is there that it would work? This was tried during the campaign. They tried to paint Joe Biden as a crazy liberal. This was tried during the campaign where the Russians and the Trump campaign tried to paint Joe Biden as not mentally competent, and he still won. So why would this work now?
Yeah, and I'm glad you noted there are two things here at play, right, John? It is the sort of notion, oh, he's this old, out of touch guy, and so other people have to be in charge. And and other people are in charge that are going to be so much more extreme and liberal than Joe Biden presents himself to be. They're trying both in this one line of attack. And to your point, John, I've seen no evidence yet that it's working. I mean, obviously, we live in very polarized times, and there is some benefit that animates the Republican base with these lines of attack. But I see no evidence that broadly with the American people that Joe Biden has suffered in any way because of this line of attack coming from Republicans. And I think they know it, which is why they're continuing to search. I mean, John Cornyn is somebody, you know, very closely tied to Mitch McConnell, very much part of the apparatus for putting together what the Republican messaging will be going into the 2022 midterms. And this is just a continued attempt now to find something that sticks because they haven't found it yet.
David, just very quickly, what does it tell us about the choice that the White House has made about where to have its political battles to this point? You know, the relief package first, infrastructure second. They're choosing advantageous political ground, it seems.
Yes, because one way to maintain your popularity is to do popular things. And so what Joe Biden has clearly chosen to do here with his administration is, even though there are lots of other issues that the left wing of the Democratic Party would like him to put front and center, they may be more divisive to the body politic overall. And so he's sticking to what he believes are broadly popular economic policies for the country as the country's trying to recover through this COVID crisis. And that's what's keeping his numbers up at the moment.
David Chalian, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yep.
So don't miss the lead this afternoon. Former House Speaker John Boehner discusses his new book, The State of the Republican Party. We don't know if there's going to be like a 5-second delay in case he swears, because he swears a lot. This is on The Lead with Jake Tapper, coming up at 4 p.m. Eastern Time.
When you have an acute situation extraordinary number of cases like we have in Michigan, the answer is not necessarily to give vaccine. In fact, we know that the vaccine will have a delayed response. The answer to that is to really close things down, to go back to our basics, to go back to where we were last spring, last summer, and to shut things down.
So that's the head of the CDC calling on Michigan's governor to reimpose restrictions as new cases of coronavirus and new hospitalizations surge in that state. Now, this comes after the Biden administration rejected Governor Gretchen Whitmer's request to increase the supply of vaccines to her state. Joining us now, Anna Palmer. She is the founder of Punch Bowl News. Gretchen Whitmer, big supporter of Joe Biden during the campaign, popular Democratic governor. So what's the level of awkward here with the White House rejecting Governor Whitmer's request?
And a key swing state, right, in Michigan for Democrats going into the next election cycle. It is awkward. I think what you're seeing, though, is that Joe Biden's team is not going to play favorites just because it's a state that he needs or that its supporters come from. It's very different than President Donald Trump, where you saw sometimes crises happen, and they would find favor if they were run by Republicans instead of Democrats.
Something weird happened, and that is that John Cornyn tweeted what now we know is a quote from a Politico piece about Joe Biden, but there were no quote marks around it, so people thought maybe it was him, his actual original words. He's still saying it, I suppose, but he's quoting. If I could just read it to you here and get your thoughts on why he did this. Quote, talking about Biden, the president is not doing cable news interviews. Tweets from his accounts are limited when they come unimaginably conventional. The public comments are largely scripted. Biden has opted for fewer sit-down interviews with mainstream outlets and reporters. And he goes on to say, invites the question, is he really in charge? My question to you is read his mind for us this morning, Anna. Why?
Well, listen, I think Senator John Cornyn often likes to use Twitter to poke the bear. But this is a talking point that you hear a lot on Capitol Hill among Republicans, and they feel like it's one of the few areas where they've kind of been able to make some headway when it comes to attacking Joe Biden, that he's elderly, that he's not actually running the ship, that it's very staff-driven administration. You're going to continue to hear those same kind of criticisms behind the scenes, and I'm sure publicly, as Democrats try to push this American jobs plan.
It's just rich following the tweeting habits of the former president. That's all I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there was a lot of Republicans that were certainly exhausted by Donald Trump and tweeting all the time. So it is kind of ironic, but this is going to be their, I think, talking point going forward.
So, Anna, there's waffling and then there's Waffle House, right? There's flip-flops and then there's Nikki Haley. They're, political gymnastics and like Nadia Comaneci. I mean, it's like you can't even name all the superlatives here, because I want to read you what she told Politico, Tim Alberta, in this interview that published January 12th about Donald Trump. She said Donald Trump was done, should be done in the Republican Party. She said he's not going to run for federal office again. I don't think he's going to be in the picture. I don't think he can. He's fallen so far. We shouldn't have followed him. We shouldn't have listened to him. And we can't let that ever happen again. Nikki Haley, January 12th. Meet Nikki Haley from yesterday. Play this.
I would not run if President Trump ran. And I would talk to him about it. That's something that we'll have a conversation about at some point if that decision is something that has to be made. Had a great working relationship with him. I appreciated the way he let me do my job. And look, I just want to keep building on what we accomplished and not watch it get torn down.
Explain.
I think she's a realist. She made those comments earlier this year. They were pretty stunning. There was certainly the Never Trumpers who were behind her, but there wasn't a huge groundswell of enthusiasm among the Republican base, which is very strongly in Donald Trump's camp, continues to be. And I think she just sees the writing on the wall that if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, if he chooses to run, she would have a very, very difficult time trying to get any momentum against him.
I can't get over, and I don't have as good analogies as Berman this morning.
Olga Corbett.
Comaneci. I mean,
Kurt Thomas.
No one does.
For the win.
Bart Connor.
But in all reality, Yeah, I'm just stunned that it doesn't seem like she knows what she believes, and that matters. Thank you, Anna. Good to have you. Coming up later this hour, we will speak with Democratic Senator.
We are in a critical point of the pandemic right now. The trajectory of this pandemic is growing. In the seventh week in a row, we've had more than 4.4 million new cases reported in the last week. If you compare that to a year ago, we had about 500,000 cases being reported per week. It is time right now where everyone has to take stock and have a reality check about what we need to be doing.
Strong words from the World Health Organization nearly 16 months into this global pandemic as cases continue to grow worldwide despite mass vaccination campaigns. So how do things get turned around? Joining us now is Maria von Kerkhoff. She's the COVID-19 technical lead at the WHO Health Emergencies Program. Thanks so much for being with us. Why are the numbers rising?
Well, I think there's a combination of factors of why the numbers are rising around the world. Excuse me. It isn't consistently growing everywhere around the world. There are some countries that have shown that they can control COVID, including these virus variants. But in a number of countries, we are seeing some virus variants, this B117, which is circulating across a number of countries in Europe. It's circulating in the United States, for example. And some of these virus variants, the variants of concern, have increased transmissibility. And if we increase transmissibility, we will have more burden on the healthcare system. And if we ease our public health and social measures too soon, if we lift those measures too soon, the virus will spread. And so I think there's a combination of factors, the variants, the fatigue, and the fact that we have inequitable and uneven vaccine distribution around the world. That combination of factors 16 months into a pandemic is really puts us in a critical situation.
In the United States, we're vaccinating more than 3 million people a day. Why isn't that enough?
Vaccine alone is not enough. One measure alone is not enough, including vaccines and vaccination. What we are advocating for at WHO and with our partners is to make sure that we vaccinated those most at risk first. These are older people and these are health workers around the world in every single country. That is of critical importance. But in addition to vaccine, it's not vaccine only, it's vaccine and we have to continue with the other measures. We have to continue with our physical distancing, avoiding crowded spaces, hand hygiene, mask wearing, improving ventilation. We need consistency in the approach at national level, at subnational levels, across a number of countries. It's the combination of factors that drives transmission down. What we need right now globally is laser focus on driving transmission down. We can do this. We can do this with the tools that we have, including vaccination, but not only vaccination. Every single citizen, every single person in the United States and around the world needs to know, what do I need to do to keep myself safe? What do I need to do to keep my family safe? And if you don't know, you need to find that out because there's so much that each of us can do. And it is critical that everybody plays their part in fighting against this pandemic.
Explain to someone in the United States why, beyond just compassion or empathy, but from an epidemiological perspective, they should care that, hey, in the United States, deaths are going down. In the United States, things may be getting better overall. Why should you care here if cases are rising across the world?
Because we live in an interconnected world. This virus does not respect borders. This virus is evolving. We are now seeing changes in the virus and mutations in the virus. This is natural evolution that is happening. People in the United States will not be safe until everyone around the world is safe. We are in this together. There is no other way to put it. All of us have a role to play, and we need to care about people around the world. And I think people do. I mean, I think everyone is concerned about what is happening. Right now, we're 16 months into a pandemic, and we shouldn't minimize the fatigue and the challenges that everybody has been in. But I think if we could think of this, people do not like the war analogy, and that's correct. We shouldn't be using a war analogy to think about this pandemic. But we have to find a way to come together, double down, and show how what I am doing in the United States is affecting people around the world. No matter what we think, viruses do not respect borders. So what we do here affects somebody else in other countries.
How do you fight the fatigue, though, which is very real? I mean, my concern is that in some ways it may be insurmountable, that once people have started to loosen restrictions, there's almost no political will to tighten them again.
I mean, I think part of that is in the communication of how we're talking about this and what we need to be doing, how long we need to be staying the course. I think we need to understand the reasons for the fatigue. What is it that is actually challenging people? Is it about their daily lives? They need to make a living and put food on the table for their families. I mean, if you think about this virus is affecting almost every person on the planet right now. It is a challenge for a number of factors. Differences for people who are older, who haven't seen loved ones for a very long time, for children who haven't been in school. Some children haven't been in school for a year. You know, there are lots of reasons for that fatigue. What we really need is strong leadership. We need consistency in the messages around the world with our leaders, our political leaders, as well as our religious leaders, our community leaders, our family leaders, about how collectively we can do this. Right. There is a mental health issue as well, because this is causing so many different challenges. We have to be able to talk about this, talk through it, and figure out ways how we're going to get through every single day. And think of that light at the end of the tunnel. Look at some of the countries that have controlled COVID, even without vaccination, who are going to sporting events, who are seeing their loved ones and putting their arms around their loved ones and giving hugs. These are the goals that all of us are thinking towards.
There are rewards.
We can do this.
There are rewards if we get through this. Maria von Kerkhoff, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
A powerful display of unity.
This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, we do have breaking news. The CDC and FDA just released a joint statement. I was reading it now, that is calling for a pause, an immediate pause in the use of the Johnson & Johnson single-dose coronavirus vaccine. This is after 6 recipients in the United States developed a rare disorder involving blood clots within about 2 weeks of the vaccination. Joining us now is Dr. Carlos Del Rio. He's the Executive Associate Dean at Emory University School of Medicine at Grady Health System. This is these adverse side effects, a rare blood clotting in 6 women, by the way, ages 18 to 48. 18 to 48, 6 women out of 6.8 million doses administered, Dr. Del Rio. So what's your takeaway here?
Well, thank you, John. I think the first takeaway is that it's a very rare event. I mean, you're talking about 1 per million. And when you give millions of doses of vaccines, you will see events like this that you couldn't see in the clinical trial just because, you didn't have millions of people enrolled. So it probably is related. It's rare. But I want to congratulate the CDC and the FDA for very quickly jumping on it, halting the vaccinations until we know more, and really trying to understand what's going on. I think vaccine safety has always been a priority, and I think this is exactly the right move until we understand what's going on and what's the way forward.
I have a lot of friends who have gotten this vaccine, so I think anyone who has gotten it in the past few weeks want to know what to look out for. Here's what the FDA says. People who've gotten this vaccine in the past few weeks who develop a severe headache, abdominal pain, leg pain, or shortness of breath within 3 weeks after vaccination should contact their healthcare provider. That's what they should do. Does this, though, show, Doctor, causality, right? That's the big question. Is it coincidence or causality, or do they not know yet?
I don't think we know yet. What we know, and we need to understand this further, but we know, for example, there's data coming out primarily from Europe in the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is also a adenovirus vector vaccine, so it may be related to the vector. The adenovirus vector vaccine may have something to do with it. What does
that mean for people? I don't put that in layman's speak for us.
Well, let me put it in very simple terms. What it means is that certain types of vaccines, such as the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson, which use a cold inactivated virus to deliver the spike protein, may be precipitating in very few rare individuals the development of antibodies against the platelet factor 4, which causes this immune thrombocytopenia and thrombosis. So what it means to people at this point in time is I think you're likely going to be okay. I mean, when you think about a 1 in a million event, that's, you cross the street every day, you have a much higher chance of getting run over by a car. So I think what people need to be is don't freak out. I'll be going on in my life, but I would be very attuned to my body. And if I develop shortness of breath, if I develop leg pain, if I develop a headache, and I'm within 2 to 3 weeks of having had the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, I would immediately notify my healthcare provider.
Just so people get a sense of the numbers again, 6.8 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been administered in the U.S. so far. You can see on your screen right next to Dr. Del Rio, that's out of about 190 million doses administered total. So more than 180 million doses that have been administered in the United States have been either Pfizer or Moderna. right? Johnson & Johnson's a very small number of this. So, Dr. Del Rio, are you concerned at all, though, that people are going to see this and say, well, I've been nervous about getting a vaccine. This justifies my anxiety?
Well, I think, the concern about any side effects is that it would likely, as you say, potentially increase vaccine hesitancy. But again, I want to emphasize that the risk-benefit ratio is way in favor of benefit. These vaccines have saved thousands of lives already. We've seen mortality in the U.S. continue to decline despite cases going up, and that's because we're vaccinating people. So the chances, I would still recommend people get vaccinated. I would not say do not get vaccinated just because of this very rare side effect. But I would say that it's the right thing to do for the CDC and the FDA to halt the vaccinations with the J&J vaccine until we understand further what's going on and until we understand, as Poppy asked, is this just a causality or is this actually causality?
John rightly pointed out something that struck me right away. They're all women, 6 women, and they're young. They're between the ages of 18 and 48. One woman died, and a second woman has been hospitalized in critical condition. Is, again, coincidence, or why would it be women that are having this impact, and young women?
Well, that's a very good question, and I think it's a question that experts in coagulation are definitely working hard to try to answer. We know women, for example, have more thrombosis when they're smokers, when, we know with birth control pills and hormone replacement, women tend to have more thrombosis. So again, there may be a hypercoagulable, issue related to hormone levels and estrogens. But what the European regulators have done, again, not with the Johnson & Johnson, but with the AstraZeneca vaccine, where a very similar thing was found. Young people, usually women, having the similar side effect, they have recommended the vaccine be used only in people over the age of 60. In some countries over the age of 50, most countries over the age of 60. It may be very well that we say this is a vaccine for people over the age of 60 because younger people could have this side effect.
All right, Dr. Del Rio, stand by for a moment, if you will. We just got word that the FDA is going to hold a news conference at 10 a.m. There are a lot of questions that people have. Hopefully the FDA will be as transparent as possible and make clear why they've made this decision. Also with us now, CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, this is big news. It's one of the 3 vaccines, albeit the one that has the least numbers in terms of people getting it, but it's one of the 3 approved vaccines in the United States. People are watching this very carefully. Your take on it, and what does this do overall to the Biden administration's goal of getting 200 million doses in people's arms by the end of this month?
Well, as far as the second part goes, if you look at some of the models and the way that the administration was sort of calculating how they would get to these numbers, it was largely based on the Pfizer vaccines and the Moderna vaccines, which are 2-dose vaccines. So, obviously this will have some impact, but, because J&J came later, because they didn't hit their initial goals, the impact is probably going to be a little bit blunted here. So I guess that's the good news. But the bad news is they've this is, I think every time we hear a report like this, people who are sort of on the fence a little bit about vaccine and, whether or not I should get it, they're a little hesitant. This fuels that to some extent. And on one hand, people look at this and they say, this is evidence of the post-vaccine monitoring system sort of working, finding these sorts of side effects, even if they are rare. On the other hand, it's going to fuel this hesitancy. I think having reported on this now since the rollout, that we saw that with AstraZeneca, we're probably going to see that to some extent with J&J. It may not be fair, and they may need to figure out exactly what's causing this, but that is likely the outcome.
Sanjay, I'm already seeing it on Twitter. I'm already seeing people say, I told you so. We were nervous about vaccines. This is exactly why. Is this justified? Again, this is 6 cases out of 7 million doses.
Yeah, I mean, it's less than 1 in a million. And we know that even, when we talk about vaccines overall, the idea of 1 in a million sort of rare side effect is usually what is quoted. But, this is also one of those things that, if you are particularly a woman in that age range and you're thinking about this vaccine, you're likely to shy away from that vaccine right now. And, I think it's and that's a large segment of the population. So I think that they need to figure this out. And they also need to figure out what happened. Some of the questions you were asking Carlos about why these women, I think that's something that's going to need to be answered. And also the treatment. Like, what do you do about this? You remember when the Pfizer vaccine came out, there was this question of these anaphylactic reactions, and they had a plan that was sort of put in place trying to identify people who were more at risk and understanding that. Right now, we're just sort of getting this information in. They may have better understanding of who's at risk or what to do about it so that someone doesn't develop these sorts of side effects after taking the vaccine, but we're not there yet. Despite the fact that it's rare, when it's an N of 1, it's not rare. So I think that's what they're going to have to deal with for some time. I do think it's good that they're getting on top of this and putting a pause on this and going to have this briefing. We'll obviously listen closely, but this is probably how it's likely to play out over the next few days.
All right, Sanjay, Dr. Del Rio, thank you both very much. Sanjay, you're going to be back in a little bit, along with Dr. Paul Offit, who was on the FDA Vaccine Advisory Panel. Obviously, we've got a lot more questions for both of you as this morning develops. Much more in the breaking news straight ahead. So what do you do with a racist theory chanted by white supremacists, embraced by killers, used for hate for generations? Well, if you're Tucker Carlson, you embrace it again and again and again. John Avlon has a reality check.
Extremists and the unhinged will always be with us, but they haven't always had people in positions of power and influence amplifying and justifying their message. That's why Tucker Carlson's double-down defense of replacement theory is worth more than his trademark confused dog look.
I know that the left and all the little gatekeepers on Twitter become literally hysterical if you use the term replacement, if you suggest that the Democratic Party is trying to replace the current electorate, the voters now casting ballots, with new people, more obedient voters from the third world. Let's just say it, that's true. I mean, everyone wants to make a racial issue out of it. Ooh, the white replacement theory. No.
Now, it's hard to argue that warning about obedient voters from the third world isn't racial, but just to level set, let's see who's been chanting about replacement. See, the Great Replacement Theory was also cited by mass shooters in El Paso and New Zealand. So Tucker should know that replacement theory is not disconnected from race and racial violence. In fact, a new analysis by the Washington Post shows that since 2015, right-wing extremists have been involved in 267 plots or attacks and 91 fatalities. Now, for Tucker, these facts might not matter. After all, Fox News lawyers argued that no one expects him to tell the truth. But let's give him the benefit of the doubt.
This is a voting rights question. I have less political power because they're importing a brand new electorate. Why should I sit back and take that? The power that I have as an American guaranteed at birth is one man, one vote, and they're diluting it.
Okay, there's a lot to work with there. First, America did not begin by guaranteeing one man, one vote. At first, only white male property owners could vote. Black men got the vote with the 15th Amendment after the Civil War, a move denounced by some as a political power grab designed to make whites a minority in the South. Women, of course, didn't get the vote till 100 years ago, when some men argued it would dilute the power of their votes and lead to societal decline. The words one person, one vote wasn't codified until the Supreme Court did it in 1964 during the Civil Rights Movement. That's when the infamous Alabama governor, George Wallace, gave a speech that might sound familiar to some viewers of Fox News. Here's what he said, quote, "I believe the American people have been pushed around long enough and that they, like you and I, are fed up with the continuing trend toward a socialist state. We must not be misled by left-wing incompetent news media that day after day feed us a diet of fantasy, telling us we're bigots, racists, and hate mongers to oppose the destruction of the Constitution and our nation." It's been said that history doesn't repeat, but sometimes it rhymes. This isn't about the past. Tucker's fanning the flames of a fire that is already burning. Because a new study of those folks charged in the Capitol attack found that fear of the Great Replacement may have been a prime driver, concluding that replacement theory might help explain why such a high percentage of riders hail from counties with fast-rising non-white populations. Tucker Carlson isn't playing a bigot. He's playing to his base. And that's your reality check.
Yeah, I also don't think he's playing anything. I think he is. I just think he's telling us exactly what side he's chosen here, and I don't think it's an act at all at this point.
I mean, the phrase, if you say it's not about the money, it's about the money. When you say it isn't about race, It's often about race.
All right, John, appreciate it. Thank you very much. We have important breaking news on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So